Okay, so I'm going to talk about this dynamic you find online of others claiming that people are mistyped. There are a few main components to this, why this happens, what this is. People have asked me before, why does this occur? Seeing the pattern and seeing that it shows up again and again. Psychologically, why does it occur? And I'd like to go into a little bit about why it happens, what it is, the general pattern, and just to try to summarize and get people to grasp kind of what we're looking at in this culture, this online culture. First of all, it can happen from a place of phoniness, of people simply doing it to gaslight, to gatekeep, to intentionally trick people, like sarcasm. Maybe they don't know what your type is, or maybe they don't believe you, but they're going to try to trick you anyway. So sometimes that happens. One of the people that I knew who was one of the biggest gatekeepers was famous for tricking people and deceiving them and misleading them, and also changing his mind about people's types. Okay, so if you come at it as an outside observer, just seeing that it's going on, you don't know necessarily whether it's intentional or not, whether the person is just kind of a troll intentionally trying to get your goat, as they say, or if they are an arrogant, confused person who is looking at a mirage, a projection of their own ego. Very common to find projection of the ego. So it falls into basic trends. The most common one is for people to claim that somebody claiming to be an 8 is actually a 6. Now, when you break it down to how the person making the claim decides, is there's never any way to prove it. There's not. There's no way. I've seen it done. I've seen the maneuvering and the claims and the debating, the so-called debating strategy, and there's never any proof. It's always subjective stuff. But they will attempt to use theory. 6 is always used because 6 is the type that was spotlighted for the counterphobic, countertype sexual 6. That became this huge ripple that went through everybody's psyche when they studied the enneagram. And somewhere along the way, it became this echo trend that amplified and became a snowball, to the point where there was so much skepticism about type 8s that they could potentially be sexual 6s that it became rare for somebody to be accepted as an 8 in certain circles. Okay. And, a rarity, truly a rarity, that it was not accepted that this was fake. Okay. So you're now taking people to study the enneagram. For me, I've been studying for a very long time, and there are people who may always tell me that I'm a 6 for some reason. Okay, so why do you see it? You see it, first of all, we know what the 8s are like. Those of us who understand the 8s, they can be powerful people. They can take over. They often do run things, and they tend to be leaders, and they can be bullies, and they can be threatening, and they can push people's buttons. Okay, so taking a whole pool of people of self-typed 8s, some of them are going to be typed correctly. It's just a fact. It's simple logic. You're taking people that are looking at the same data, but it's about them. There are going to be plenty that are typed accurately. So if you believe that anybody is typed accurately, because that's what everybody's using to type themselves. Unfortunately, the 8 has this cultural phenomenon surrounding it, where it's questioned and gaslighted. And the end result is that 8s themselves end up running up against that. And I think it's because 8s have some of this domination to answer to. They do have a big unapologetic energy. They don't give a shit. They're coarse, they're aggressive, they're callous, they're all these things. And people are threatened by them, they're intimidated by them. They idolize them when they're healthy, because the 8s are a raw, inspiring force of nature. They're kind of an archetypal leader, and everybody in their mind has a built-up projection of what they think the real 8s are. The healthy ones are like Martin Luther King, man. So when you see people claiming that someone's not an 8, it's a projection of in their psyche. First of all, if they don't like you much, you can feel it. If they're mean to you, if they're rude to you, then it means they don't like you much, and they've seen some things in you that go against their idealized view of the 8. There is a kind of idealized view of the 8 in some circles, and I think that maybe those people would deny it. Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't. But intentionally, invalidating somebody else's self-typing is a way of opposing them, right? So it's a way of trying to be combative with you, to skirmish you, and to joust up against you and do whatever, right? You're not doing it to them. So there's something about claiming to be an 8 that threatens people. Sometimes those observing are 8s themselves or claiming to be, in which case the hypocrisy becomes amplified, becomes even worse. But regardless, it's a hypocritical stance that people are taking. So when you're dealing with people who are driven profoundly by hypocritical realities, as in that is the status of being and acting as a hypocrite, they are a kind of walking contradiction, an absurd person, an absurdity. And they are sort of like trying to become little authoritarian dictator tyrants. That is their sole motivation here. So you run into with people with around the type 8, which is ironic, and this cycle between the 8 and the 6, and trying to tell you you're 6 and you're not the 8 and all this. And it's interesting that happens with these two types, and kind of the isomorphisms and the reflection between these two and how it operates socially. Okay, the next thing is 6 can apply to other types as well. Mostly people like to take self-claiming 8s, but they could also take other types. 6, that's to show you how well 6 works. It has been used socially, psychologically, communally in this way. That's its kind of proxy. It's a proxy type. It stands in for other types very well, in the sense that you can take a 5, for instance. A 5, it's very common for people to say that a self-typed 5 could be a 6. That works. I could list ways that it works for a number of types. So it happens very often. And you're sitting in front of a computer and you're looking at text on the screen, and you don't know who the person is, what's going on. Maybe you're even seeing a video of them. Maybe people watching this now say, no, that's a 6. But they're just speaking nonsense. Essentially what they're claiming is that they're taking a skeptical stance on, that I'm a thinking, conscious person on this end, that I've thought about my life and the enneagram and reality as much as they have about their life. And that skepticism is a form of extreme arrogance when you really break it down. And they're trying to make being right easy for themselves. Normally, it can be hard to be right. When you're arguing with other people and you're faced with oppositions all over the place, it can be very difficult to be right. That's why they have, competitions with debate. And in this world, to be right and different from other people. Not everybody gets to do that. But this makes being right and others wrong a perpetual reality for them. Okay? It makes that very easy for them. And all you have to do is show up and make it so. You just have to believe it yourself. So it's a little bit like, if you can believe that you are right, hey, I'm right about this. These people aren't 8s. They're full of shit. Okay, that was easy. It's the ultimate lie that you can trick yourself. Now, the next question is, can you trick other people? If you can trick the person that's self-typed, then sure, okay. So that becomes the first challenge. Oh my gosh, I should be able to convince this person. And they can get angry about it. They can start to hate you if they can't convince you, because then them being right now is not as strong, right? Because they should be able to convince somebody other than themselves, right? Unless they themselves are more right, in a sense that they're on a higher level and they can see things you can't see. And they also have to then make sure that you're in denial, because you would have to be in denial for that to work. So they then create another narrative where you're in denial. Okay. And it goes on and on like this. And meanwhile, they're the whole time believing that their self-typing is correct. So the amount of bias and the confirmation bias and kind of, misconceptions and can grow into delusions. It simply becomes a matter of affirming your own conclusions and believing that you're right without actually needing to prove that. Okay, you can prove it yourself, but when you prove it to others, it becomes a type of persuasion. Now, maybe you can convince other people as well, who are external parties, and that becomes a thing too. You find groups dedicated to armchair philosophizing and about people's types. There are people sitting around now who believe that Trump is a type 3. 100 people in one room that say, yeah, we figured it out, he's a 3. So you can get a groupthink that gets together and says, yes, we're right, and they figured it out. And it's true. But Trump, he doesn't believe it. I'm quite sure that he would type himself as an 8. And I'm quite sure that he is an 8. And I think the majority of people believe that he's an 8. So these people end up kind of being in the minority as time goes on. There could still be relatively quite a few of them, but they're still usually in the minority, and their view contradicts the person typing themselves. So that's an important thing. It's extremely important for the person doing the self-typing to be firm on it, because that gives them, first of all, that's the thing that matters the most anyway. But as far as knowing what this thing is, seeing it in action and figuring it out, you eventually start seeing more and more. That, hey, this person's sure of their type, hey, I buy it, he buys it, everyone. But then there's a group that doesn't buy it, and you start to see that they're the ones projecting. They're the ones in denial, and they're the ones that are narcissistic and arrogant. Okay, so now that we see how it works, and why it happens with 8s, that 8s are threatening, and people like to try to do takedown on 8s, and it pushes people's buttons. 8 is the bully, or the champion leader, or whatever, the outlaw star, and they're the hard ass, the badass that everyone wants to be. Okay, so when somebody's claiming to be the 8, it's some big thing, right? It's the one to question. And the 6 is kind of the little guy that they're trying to shove in there and say, well, no, you're the 6, right? So, okay, all right. Next point has to do with 9s. 9 actually works a little bit better as a proposed type, better than 6 for some other types. In particular, 4 and 5. The other two most commonly types to have this done to them. Okay. The type 4, believed to be the true individualist artist. They're more rare than people believe, right? Okay, so 9 works extremely well for this. And these, keep in mind, these are actual mistypes. These do actually happen. At some level, of course they do. Right? I mean, there are a lot of people that think that they were the 8, and then they learn later on that they're the 6, and they go, okay, my bad, right? And similarly with the 4 and 9. But that doesn't mean that it applies to all cases. So it takes a true occurrence and it amplifies it, exaggerates it, says this is happening here. So it doesn't just happening one time, it happens all the time. It's overgeneralization of something that can happen, basically. So it happens with 4 and 9, and it happens also with 5 and 9. I eventually realized that the 4s, 5s, and 8s are probably a little bit less common, but not that much. And it probably varies by population. But we don't have statistics on it. We really don't. And because of that, it becomes a very slippery slope where it can quickly have this snowball effect of they're a little bit rare, they're super rare, they're non-existent, everybody's a mistype. And then it then makes sense why everybody would be gaslighted, because we're looking at a socially, Darwinian world here, and the Enneagram is a self-powerful, empowering tool, right? When you know your type and you can operate within your type, and you've got the power. I mean, it helps you find yourself and to take control and to be you. And so once you start to see how these invalidation patterns and principles operate, it makes sense why people would be prone to doing it. It's a little bit like why people cut others off when they're driving. I mean, it's just one of those dick moves. It's just people being assholes. Okay, so once you see it's just people doing that without really even understanding that they're doing it and why they're doing it, it makes perfect sense, and you'll see that it's just an ongoing reality. It's not ever going to change all the way. Some people troll it and do it for fun as a joke. Other people do and don't realize they're doing it. Others do it and maybe eventually change. There's a spectrum of how it operates. Some do it and they're right, and they catch the people and whatever, right? There's a big spectrum there of whether these people are really this type or not. But just the act of instilling doubt into others, very common. It's extremely common. It's one of the most common social, trends that you see in the Enneagram community, which is a function of other people thinking that they know, that they have, that they understand other people, and that once they understand their type now, they have to understand all of the types pretty well. And they are sort of insecure in a way, these people who presume that. They're a little bit insecure. I think maybe some of the time they're not so sure about their own types. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they're not sure about their types. Other times they're just having issues in their lives or whatever with their, they don't trust people, they don't like people. But they're having some projective issues. They don't trust people is a big one. Sometimes they think other people are stupid and can't understand this thing. And, that proves a kind of internal arrogance of a desire to be better than other people, whether it's true or not. In this case, it really isn't, but, the desire to know more, the desire for other people to be mistyped, because they jumped to that assumption. So going into it with that in mind, you can see unconsciously what people are prone to doing, and then you can figure out why. And yeah, so what happens with those types? 6 works well for 8. 9 works well for 4 and 5. 6 kind of works well for all of them if you want. So between 6 and 9, you've got it all sorted out. Now it's just a matter of coming up with an argument, which is very easy to do, that frames whatever you're seeing of the person in the particular light or bias that you want to frame it within. You could say, well, this is obviously based on fear. You could say, you could say something. They're all unprovable, really, but you could say, I just don't believe that. I don't buy that. That's obviously not really accurate for the type. I mean, with a little bit of knowledge and ability to communicate, you can easily try to blow smoke up your own ass and say they're not that type, right? But it doesn't mean that that's accurate. Oftentimes people are accurately typed, or if they are mistyped, they're not that far off. The people making the claims can frequently, the claims of the mistypes can frequently be wrong. They can be terrible typists. I mean, they can be the most miserably unimaginative, predictable, gaslighting, retypists. And I know because I did it myself. I watched it and I saw how it operated, and it got to be predictable. So that's the way it goes. That's how it is. All right, hope this helps people to understand, and it's the best way I know of explaining it. I guess I forgot to mention that, the 4, it's because they're the special one. That's why that's gay kept. That they're supposed to be rare and unique. So they're grilled. Hey, is that a real 4? I don't know. It seems like you're not special enough, right? And then the 5 has to do with their intelligence and the presumption that the 5 is a genius or whatever. There can't possibly be that many 5s because the 5s are supposed to be a little bit more special and smart and quirky. Okay, so that's kind of how the 5 works with the 5. The 8 is they're strong and they're aggressive, and there can't be that many of the leader aggressive alpha types. So those types ended up in there with those stereotypes, which happened over time, by the way. They ended up being, the embodiment of those people's conception of those types. If you look at early portrayals of it, there wasn't as much. There wasn't as much of those biases imbued or loaded into the type profiles. It happened over time. All right. Thank you for watching, and I hope that this makes sense to people.